Entitlement thinking. And you probably now already have in your mind someone where you say, I know one of these people. And we're going to talk about entitlement thinking in a slightly different way today. Of course, you know people who think, just to give you a definition. Entitlement thinking means someone thinks they deserve something without having it earned. And of course, especially in today's working world, many people say certain people, certain generations, certain groups, certain attitude towards work has changed in a way that I consider entitlement thinking. And the question is that really the case? Is that the case that we can say in a sustainably, scientifically proven way, is entitlement thinking growing? Or is the problem maybe a bit more complex than we thought in the beginning? So when you now think of your working world, the place where you work or the business you run, what do you think about entitlement thinking, and is it really an issue? So welcome to this week's episode. When we talk about entitlement thinking, we're going to talk about it from a scientific point of view. So it means we're not going to deal with only opinions, because one of the reasons why we have this episode today is we had a massive discussion last week where someone in recruiting posted, the question about remote work alone is annoying. And then there was a whole discussion about, is remote work feasible? Yes, no. What do people think about that? What do employers think about that? And we have to get to the bottom of this. And the bottom of this is, do people practice entitlement thinking, or is there another issue which we need to address? Because otherwise, simply telling people you're an entitlement thinker probably is not going to move them towards working for us. Entitlement and new work. So first, of course, are there real world cases? Yes, there are many real world cases out there. And of course, one of the very earliest you probably think of is now generations, that you say the young people want to have it all without wanting to work. So maybe you saw the New York Times article where they looked up when for the first time did someone say no one wants to work anymore. And that goes back as far as 1711. So roughly for 315 years, no one wants to work anymore. Looking outside, I think it went pretty well for no one working for more than 300 years so far. That's, of course, an ongoing issue where many people say, when no one wants to work anymore, we can't keep up the level of economy that we have. And of course, often included in that is that people say, look, you just came out of vocational training, you just came out of university, and what is the salary you want to have? When I started, I got, and then you start your story. This is the payment issue, often is considered an entitlement. The payment issue often is a significant one. And just to give you a reference that you can relate to, do you remember when your parents told you about their way to school, how they had to get to school? And usually it starts with, when I was young, it was snowing every day of the year, 365 days a year. And basically the story they tell you is that their way to school, just the path they had to follow was slightly more difficult than Reinhold Messner getting on Mount Everest. And of course, you roll your eyes, and that's, by the way, the same that people do. There's a difference between reflecting experiences and self-referential leadership. Self-referential leadership is bad, while reflecting experiences is good. I give you the two examples here. When you, for example, say, hey, in my opinion, when we deal with the clients that we have, I'm doing this for more than 15 years now. This is what probably works based on all the proposals that we won, and that's probably something that does not work based on the proposals we lost. That is something people appreciate because you made mistakes that they do not need to make again. However, when you do self-referential leadership, it says, this is the way it needs to be done. It's the only way how it can be done. My way is right. Your way is wrong. Your way is wrong because my way is right. Look at me. I am the rock star and you are here to learn. So kneel down. You have an audience here to serve. And that is one of the worst moments in leadership. And by the way, these are the people who still manually compare Microsoft Excel list because they say, oh, this modern Excel thing, you don't know if AI, no one knows what AI does. Yeah, so no one knows if it works. So let's just do manual checks because all this Excel thing can also be wrong. Excel is AI, isn't it? Oh, it's not, but it has AI. I don't get that. So it's all bad, I think. And that, of course, is part of the issue. Payment is part of huge discussions, and very quickly people get thrown to the term, you're an entitlement thinker. And the third aspect often is flexibility. When do people work? What are the working hours? And especially from where do they work? Work from home, work from anywhere, work from the office, work wherever else. So you see that often the term entitlement thinking is very, very quickly used in today's working world. And what we need to do here is we need to check the reality. And of course, there are people who are entitlement thinkers. I just give you a couple of examples. When people just come out of their vocational training or their university, any kind of education, they immediately want to have a career which cannot be substantiated neither by experience nor by knowledge because it's all theory. And even theoretical, it can be of value, but often between theory and real world practice, there's a significant difference. I give you a very simple example here. When you have your vocational training in construction, it's a massive difference if you're able to able to build a house, or if you're able to build a house and deal with all the stakeholders, the investors, the people owning it, the family putting the money on the table. This communication part is quite difficult, and people with more experience are better at it, which is why they often have more of a career. In addition to that, often people say, yeah, anyone wants to have a career, but no one wants to have the accountability. We struggle more and more that people take accountability. They want the payment and the career, but they do not want to have the accountability. And in some fields, that is absolutely omnipresent, ubiquitous. Anywhere you see that, for example, in consultancy, or in my job as well, less and less people are joining my industry in the freelance sector for a very simple reason, because often you have people who either end up becoming self-employed because no one wants to employ them anymore, or you have people who simply say, I need to have days where I don't be that, where I'm not going to be that present. I just give you a very simple example. You can have very present days in the office where you are very engaged, communicate a lot, and sometimes you have more relaxed days where you do a bit of office work, a bit of screen time, and you do a bit of here, a bit of there, but you don't really do that much because you needed that day with less stress. And when you, for example, work, when I have interim mandates, hardly ever this day exists because then they wouldn't get an interim candidate, an external person out there, and also, or in there to be precise. And also, when you work as a trainer in front of a group, you do not have a single day off as soon as you stand in front of a group. You can have days off in the office, but then you don't get paid. When you say you want to do something in front of people, you cannot ever say, hey, look, I'm having a bit of a slow day in the office, so this is going to be pretty boring here. I'm just reading out the slides. So you're not in the mood for interaction anymore, just not working. So accountability is an issue. Many people want to have the career and the pay, but not the accountability. And in addition to that, you have results versus time, the instant reward generation that many people claim are entitlement thinkers. We never can generalize. However, some people simply want to have a career way too quickly. The question now is that the whole story? And to be fair, it's not. As someone, and of course we have to, full disclosure of my biases here, I am a liberal, I am politically liberal from a European Swiss point of view, and I am an employer. So of course, I look at many things from a bias of an employer. Still, when I see the discussion we had last week on LinkedIn, that was the definition of corporate entitlement thinking. We have many aspects where people say, you have to do this, anything else is wrong. And I give you examples here. When organizations say something like, and that, by the way, was stated by a recruiting professional, and the recruiting professional said, and I quote word by word, yeah, remote work is possible, but only when you talk to your leader first, and maximum 1 or 2 days a week. Never fully remote, not possible. How does that sound to you? When you apply to multiple organizations, some of them say, hey, you have 3 days or 2 days remote, the rest is on site. And some say, yeah, you have to talk to the leader. Many people know what that means. It usually means it gets socially punished when you dare to work from home. And of course, you might now say, maybe there are good reasons. And someone in this discussion asks, what are the aspects that you offer to make things attractive? And the answer was, and I quote word by word, yeah, there isn't really anything that we do to make it more attractive because, before COVID, they also all were in the office. So we don't see why we should make it more attractive. And by the way, in future, because of course that answer didn't go down too well. And afterwards, that recruiting professional said, we have a great campus, meaning the area where the company is located, and we have a great canteen. Nice campus, news here. People usually have it quite nice at home because when they want to work from home, they do it because they have it quite nice at home. Good canteen, people have nice food at home. Why don't you add something like free coffee and free water? Another of the pseudo benefits. When I hear these kind of statements in recruiting, I know why so many organizations are struggling. But the worst of it all was when suddenly the statement came up and says, it is not appreciation towards our production staff when you can go and work from home, but they don't. That is, to be absolutely precise, one of the worst piles of nonsense I have heard in the last 12 months. You cannot simply compare different jobs because people decide for different jobs due to different motivations. When you say we all need to have the same, you cannot follow this up because I can simply say, look, your CEO probably has a company car. Would be really unfair if not everyone has a company car. So do interns get a free company car as well? No, that's not fair, is it? Or hey, the CEO has higher salaries, right? Anyone should have really high salaries. And then immediately someone will say, well, there are different jobs with different consequences. Exactly. That's exactly my point, not yours. People say, I'm going through vocational training or university degrees, including all the efforts, time, and costs, because they say maybe after that I can have a job where I can work from home 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days a week. And if it's one day, but there must be remote work in most situations. And as soon as you have a proper, valid reason for remote work or against remote work, then people will understand. When you say, hey, we have clients coming in, we meet them on site, we can't send them home to you, and we have clients coming in every single day, and you have to see them every single day because many clients show up spontaneously, anyone will understand. That's our business. That's how we make money. And that's why I can't work from home. And by the way, there are many jobs now that have remote work because sometimes people say things where you think maybe you didn't think your life decisions through. So, for example, once just a couple of weeks ago, I talked to a receptionist who said anyone can have work from home, just not me. Well, receptionist jobs pretty much are on site. However, many people, probably you have seen it as well on Instagram, where a hotel was shown where they outsourced the reception. There was someone sitting in front of a camera from home, and they did the whole check-in procedure only by the by the screen. The hotel card fell down there, and then you could take it out of a slot, and then you had your hotel card, everything. There was a human being, not an AI, a human being sitting there. However, of course, that human being did not come from the UK. It came from a country where salaries and payment is way lower, and there's a service provider offering these services of virtualized receptionists for middle class hotels. So when you see remote work and career, that is where often corporations, organizations, employer come up with the most random reasons why you need to be on site. And especially when people say, oh, we have such a great culture. I immediately ask the same question. Say, great, amazing to have such a great culture. So you have really modern workplaces, collaboration, cooperation areas. You had workplace consulting. Everything was refurbished probably during the pandemic. So you do not have these long alleyways, hallways where you just have offices left and right with like a name on the door, like you're in a public office somewhere. Silence. Immediately silence as the result. Because what people mean with great culture is we want to control you, that you sit there and work. And by the way, when you think that people can show up to work and not work, when you think people are lazy at home, you should consider what some people do in the office. When you don't want to work, you can spend your day, especially in larger organizations, you do a bit of chit chat here, go to the water dispenser, go to the cafeteria, you do a bit of Amazon. No one can look on your screen anyway, so you do whatever you want to do there. And when you think that control is the key to better work results, you really missed out on 101 leadership sessions. And yes, there are some people who are difficult to handle and you need a bit of more control. However, just adding more and more control raises the bar of the cost significantly, and the profit margin you have on the product you sell will most likely diminish or be non-existent in the very, very near future. So organizations often, when it comes to remote work, the career, the communication around all of that, saying, oh yeah, you have to talk to your leader in only 1 or 2 days. And that basically means we don't want remote work. And also payment, when people say, how do you dare to ask for so much payment? You work for less. People worked for less before the pandemic. Here are the news. It's after the pandemic. Maybe you missed that, didn't get the memo. Who knows? But it's after the pandemic. Things have changed. You cannot say, oh, things were always better back in the days, because We aren't back in the days. We aren't right now. You have to see that you need to adapt to modern circumstances. And to find the right balance between the two is challenging. It's not easy. And that is why many companies professionally train their leaders on remote work. I have professional education. By the way, when you now say remote work is not for you, here the news from a scientific point of view. I did my training with Professor Cedal Neely, Harvard University. Scientific evidence also published in a more understandable way. When you don't want to read through 4,000 pages of published studies, you can read the book Remote Work Revolution by Professor Cedal Neely. And when you then say there's an error in there, science has peer review. You can comment on that. You can say there were errors in data handling, there were errors in interviewing. You can comment on all of that on a scientific level. But unfortunately, what we usually have is that some sort of patriarchal structure, someone on the top of that, or some owner who has no contact to working people anymore and usually lives somewhere near the business they built up. And they say, I don't like it. I don't like remote work. Work is on site, right? Show up. I pay you for that. I pay you for that. And then people come and say, oh, great, because the other company just around the corner, they offer me remote work on a 40-hour-a-week contract. So I drive an hour and back to you. So that's 5 hours a day, one direction, and 5 hours the other direction, so 10 hours a week. So you pay me for these 10 hours and you cover the cost at face value? No. So that about payment here. So another lie. So here you see you need to find the balance. We have people, without any doubt, and believe me, as someone who is a liberal and an employer, I am in favor of anything that is related to merit-based achievements and rewards. However, often people are called entitlement thinkers when they simply say there is a reasonable modernization taking place in the workplace and you simply have to adapt to that. And that is more than reasonable and nothing is wrong with that. My company did remote work from the very beginning. Back in the days, due to a different approach, we simply couldn't afford an office as a startup. And back in the days, end of the 90s, no one gave you any kind of office rental contract when you didn't have any kind of money on the account. And startup centers didn't exist back in the day. So we did it by coincidence. But we quickly find out how attractive this made us as an employer. And that's what we actively used in recruiting. The question now is, how do you get all of that implemented in your organization? So first, of course, you always have to be aware, follow science and research. Your personal opinion, when you say you have an opinion on remote leadership, I can tell you talents on the market will have an opinion on your approach. Anyone has an opinion today, and anyone is not shy about telling you what their opinion is, even if you didn't even ask about that. Science and research leads the way, no exception. If you have an opinion which diverges from science, you can either deliver the proof or you better change your mind, because otherwise you're making a fool out of yourself, and probably you do not want to do that. The next aspect of that is you need to get an awareness, and that always means you need to professionally train and coach your people. And again, I keep saying that the $49, the €49, the £49 online class, which people should watch during their lunch break, isn't making the cut. It's not going to change anything. People click on play, it plays in the background, and they open Excel and they just keep on working. So you need to professionally train people on remote leadership. I learned it, so you can learn it. It's a learnable skill, and it doesn't even take much time. 1 or 2 days, you have the principles, you apply them, it's all good. Nothing changes from there. And as soon as you have a real reason against remote work, people will always understand that, but your personal opinion is not a proper reasoning. Be aware that as soon as you want to have talents, you are in competition with absolutely anyone. When you say, oh, we know our competition, they are down the road. No, not that competition. You are not in competition, especially when remote work is an option. You are not in competition with the companies down the road. You're not in competition with the companies in your city. You're not even in competition with the companies in your region or your state or your country. When you have a job where remote work is theoretically possible, you are in competition with any organization globally on this planet. Absolutely any organization that has access to internet. And that is something which you need to be aware of, because aggressively, companies are recruiting from companies where they have better offers, more flexible staff, good qualification. And that is not even an unknown thing. You know that we have outsourcing, and suddenly we're outsourcing qualified jobs and not just something where you think in that country we can do it a bit cheaper. So be sure that you modernize your approach. Entitlement thinkers exist. I give you that, and I fully support that, and they make me angry as much as they make you angry. However, We, especially at the moment, have too much entitlement thinking from the employer side and too much entitlement thinking from the organization side. And from a sustainable leadership point of view, as soon as we get to the right attitude, the right mindset, and especially the right factual understanding, the right skill, then the working world will become a better one for all of us. And I wish you all the best implementing that in your organization. And when you now say, well, we might be on the right or maybe not the so much right end of that, I'd like to discuss something, feel free to contact me. But first, of course, when you watch me on YouTube, feel free to like this video, feel free to subscribe. And of course, we publish one thing every week. Feel free to comment, of course, when you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Feel free to review, leave 5 stars there. Thank you very much for doing so. And of course, feel free to recommend this to absolutely anyone you like. Share it amongst friends, colleagues, anyone, put it on social media, anything is welcome. One aspect which we only have online on YouTube, the so-called YouTube Shorts, as the name says, only available on YouTube, leadership tips. We have more than 100 online right now. Be sure that you sign up for that. You can only watch them via YouTube, so signing up, subscribing to our channel, it pays off to have that little bell activated so you don't miss anything in the future. And of course, you can also follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can go to my website, nb-networks.com, and there you see what I do for a living. Also, because we had the request right now recently, yes, we will have a certain press part here where we put all the press things we had. Some people heard or saw on my social media. I was quoted by Forbes magazine and by Newsweek, which of course I'm incredibly proud of. Thank you very much for your support, and thank you very much for the multiple and many congratulations which I received on that matter. When you now say, yeah, I'd like to discuss something, but really not in the comment section because it's too private, too specific, too company bound, and simply strictly confidential, feel free to send me an email, nb@nb-networks.com. Send me an email and we take it from there. When you have something very specific where you say, hey, we need training, speaking, coaching, consulting, mentoring, we need project interim management, very happy to do that as well. I'm looking forward to hearing from you here. But we can also just have a chat via email and exchange. And thank you very much for the very professional and respectful discussions we had in the recent past. Thank you very much. When you now say, I like to have live sessions, and yes, we have them, please go to expert.nb-networks.com. When you put in your email address there, you only receive one email every Wednesday morning. It's 100% content ad free guarantee. What you get is, first, free access to all the podcasts, more than 400 in English and German. No paywall, no nothing. Full access to all the articles, more than 400 in English and German available there as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing you there. And in that leadership letter, you have the date, the time, and the access URL, the access link to access the session. You don't have to register for it. You only have to click on the link, and there you are at the right time, of course, on the right date. But we only communicate the live sessions via our leadership letter. There is no other means where we communicate that. The most important, well, by the way, of course, you can also follow and connect with me on social media. LinkedIn is the most common one. Of course, you can also find me in the German one, Xing. You can add me on Instagram, and of course, Facebook and YouTube are also options here. The most important thing, however, is always the last thing I say. Apply what you heard in this podcast. The reason is very simple. You will only see positive change when you apply what you heard here. I fully understand that entitlement thinkers can drive you up the wall, and by the way, they do the same with me. However, we cannot just stand there and say, this is our set of thinking, and you have to adapt to that. That is simply not modern leadership. So be aware that we have to modernize as well. So apply what you heard. By the way, when you send me any kind of message because you have any kind of question, no worries. I'm always answering within 24 hours or less. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you there. Apply what you heard, and then everything will get better from there. At the end of this video cast, as well as the end of this podcast, there's only one thing left for me to say. Thank you very much for your time.